Now, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Laura Carstensen, the Professor of Psychology and the Farley S. Dickinson Jr. Professor of Public Policy at Stanford University, where she serves as the founding director of the Stanford Center on Longevity and the principal investigator for the Stanford Lifespan Development Laboratory. Please help me welcome Laura to the stage.
Thank you, Joanne. And thank you all for being here. And while I'm at it, I want to thank Randy Antic again for bringing us all together and doing such a fabulous job organizing an interesting and complex day. I want to talk about longevity. And as Joanne said, it is not just about the elderly. People are living longer than our grandparents ever would have imagined. I'm going to make some guesses about your backgrounds, your levels of education, your affluence in society, and based on that, I'm going to tell you that the vast majority of you are going to sail through your 80s, into your 90s, and a lot of you are going to live to be 100 and beyond. Now, let me ask for you to raise your hands if you've had a child or a grandchild born in your family since the year 2000. Okay, let's talk about longevity. Because demographers predict that the majority of babies born in the developed world since 2000 will live to be 100 and beyond. So the next time you're driving by a schoolyard, and you look out the window and you see those little ones swinging on the tire swings and playing on the play structures, I want you to understand that you're looking at the first centenarians of the 22nd century. They are here, they are living among us, and it is our job, indeed I think it's our duty, to build a world that will support them all the way through century-long lives. In the 20th century, life expectancy nearly doubled in developed nations around the world. And although we do spend a lot of time these days talking about aging and increased life expectancies, I think we usually miss how profound these changes actually are. So let me zoom out for a minute and see if I can put it in perspective. Throughout most of human evolution, life was short. We don't know exactly what life expectancy was as our ancestors were evolving on the African plains, but the estimates range from 18 to 20. Barely long enough to ensure survival of the species. And evolution acted on age in these early times, and life expectancy got a little bit longer, a little bit longer. Now, fast forward to the mid-1800s. In this country, life expectancy had reached the mid-30s. Go to 1900, life expectancy was 47. And then at the end of that century, life expectancy was 77. Today it's 79, and it's continuing to go up. This is an extraordinary development. And it's not just individuals who are aging, societies are aging. So when we talk about aging societies or old societies, they're societies where there's a greater proportion of older people than younger people. And we're also experiencing aging societies. It's not just because the people are living longer, it's because across the same years that life expectancy was going up, fertility rates fell by half. So we had half as many children, and we're living 30 years longer, and that means that the distribution of age in the population has changed enormously. 100 years ago, 4% of the population's over 65. Today in this country, it's 14%, and it'll go to over 20% by 2030. So people ask me often, how long can we live? We see these changes going on. There's life expectancy still going up. And the answer is, we don't know. We don't know what lifespan capacity is in humans. We know what it is in fruit flies and Drosophila, but we don't know how long individuals could conceivably live. We do know that so far the reigning champ of longevity is a woman named Jean-Louis Calment, a French woman who died in 1997 at the ripe old age of 122. And I love to tell people about Jean-Louis Calment, because if any of you are a little uneasy about aging, you should know about her. She's a wonderful character. She rode her bicycle till she was about 110 when she decided she should stop. She smoked. I'm not recommending it, but she did smoke and drank. And she had a great sense of humor. She was interviewed by a journalist at the age of 120, and the journalist said to her, "What sort of a future do you envision?" And she looks her straight in the eye and she pauses and she says, "A very short one." But my favorite Calment story, hands down, is one about a property deal that she made at the ripe old age of 90. So Calment lived in the family home, her family home in the French city of Arles. She was raised in that home, and she had every intention of living her last days in that home. But there was this young man, this 47-year-old lawyer, and he really wanted to buy the house. So he would make her an offer. She would say no. He would go away. He'd come back a couple weeks later. He'd make her a better offer. She'd say no. And this went on for some time. And then one day, he arrives on her doorstep, and he says, "I've got a proposition for you." He says, "I will pay you $400 a month for the rest of your life if you will deed the house to me on your death." She thinks about it. She says, "Okay." And they drop a contract and have it signed. And over the next 30 years, this fellow paid her more than 3 times the value of her home. She outlived him by 2 years. But over the years they'd become friends, and he attended her 120th birthday party, and they were overheard talking. And she had turned to him at one point and she said, "We all make bad deals." That's what 120 plus can look like. Now, there are scientists today who are actively trying to slow or even stop aging. And it's not a new idea. I mean, we used to sail off in ships searching for the fountain of youth, and now we turn to laboratories to see what we can do about aging itself. And we don't know what's going to come of those efforts, but I can tell you with complete confidence that stretching out lifespan had nothing to do with the changes that we're living through today. The changes we're living through today have to do with the odds of making it to old age. What's happening is that populations previously shaped like pyramids with many young ones at the bottom winnowed to a tiny peak at the top of survivors. Those pyramids are being reshaped into rectangles. In 1900 and before, death was common at all ages. It was particularly common in childhood. In 1900, 25% of babies born in the United States died before they reached 5. Many more died by the time they reached 12. Maternal mortality, death during childbirth, was also very high. Death was so common at all ages that it wasn't particularly strongly associated in people's minds with old age. And because of these early deaths, our ancestors invested heavily in science and technology and behavior change to save the lives of the young ones. We used science to discover the causes of diseases and the ways that they were spread. And then we developed widespread public health programs to inoculate young people against diseases they would never have to suffer. We understood how contagious diseases were spread and put in place the systematic disposal of waste, garbage collection, which greatly reduced the spread of disease. We didn't stop there. We purified the waterways. We pasteurized milk. We invested in agricultural technologies that ensured a steady food supply throughout the year. And as we had fewer children, we as a society said we should invest more in children. And we put public education in place in every state in this great nation so that all children, not just the privileged few, could learn how to read and to write. And so that population pyramid being reshaped into a rectangle. If you're the kind of person who can get chills from population statistics, my people, these are the ones that should do it, because what it means is for the first time in human history, the majority of babies born in the developed world are having the opportunity to grow old. So here we are, standing at a point in time where routinely 4 and 5 generations will be alive at the same time. Let me put that in perspective. A 20-year-old today, a male 20-year-old today, has a better chance of having a living grandmother than a 20-year-old male in 1900 had of having a living mother. And these advances are extraordinary cultural achievements. Extraordinary. You might think that people would be out dancing in the streets, cheering and shouting, we're going to live for a very long time. It's more years, more time to pursue our dreams, to realize our goals, to spend time with our loved ones. But that's not been the response. The response to aging at an individual and a societal level has been concern. There's a lot of hand-wringing about aging, individually and societally. This redistribution of age in the population is straining social programs and infrastructures, and individuals are worried about themselves and their parents, their loved ones, and how they will age. So let me say 2 things about what we're learning about aging. One is that the more we learn about aging, the more nuanced the story becomes. Many people think of aging as this slow, steady process of decline. Not so. We hear a lot about cognitive performance failing and slowing. We get a little bit slower as we age in the uptake of new information. But if you look at knowledge, we know a lot more the older we are. Emotional stability, mental health improves with age. Older people are less likely to have any of the psychiatric disorders than younger people do, with the exception of the dementias, the brain disease of old age. And the state of older people, the status of older people, has been improving over historical time. Dementia rates have been falling a lot over history since the 1970s. Every generation in the last 50 years that has arrived at old age, at 65, every generation that's gotten there has been healthier than the one before it. So we have a population that's growing of people who are educated, healthier than ever before, and emotionally stable. You know, it's beginning to seem like older people may be the only natural resource that's actually growing. Now, don't get me wrong. We have a lot of work to do. Osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, stroke, heart disease, cancer, which you'll hear a lot more about today. These are challenges that were not challenges 100 years ago when people died very young, and are new challenges today, and we need to invest in science like we never have before. Science is what got us here, and we need science now to get us all the way through. The best news of the day may be that the potential of science today is breathtaking. All we need is the dedication to invest in it, and we will see lives begin to flourish. But to really fully realize the gift of longer life and healthier life, we need to change the way we live. And momentarily, I'm going to introduce you to 3 colleagues who are leading thinkers about ways to change how we think about life and work and family, technology, financial security. They're leading innovators in these areas. I'll introduce you to Professor Andrew Scott, who is an economist at the London Business School and co-author of The 100-Year Life, Living and Working in an Age of Longevity. He's going to talk to us about the conceptions of work that are and need to change. I'll introduce you to my esteemed colleague, Professor Philip Pizzo, who is Dean of the School of Medicine at Stanford University until recently, and when he stepped down, he founded the Distinguished Careers Institute at Stanford. It's a program, and by the way, many fellows from the program are here today. It's a program where he brings to the university people who have lots of experience and have had distinguished careers, and he says, come to Stanford for a year, be students. It's been an extraordinary, transformative program at Stanford, and he'll tell you more about that. And I'll introduce you to Mr. Stephen Johnston, a Silicon Valley entrepreneur and technology expert who co-founded an organization called Aging 2.0. It's an organization that invests and supports innovators who are developing businesses that will help to support long and healthy lives. But before I leave, I want to leave you with one idea. I think we're missing these. The culture, the social norms that guide us through life today are ones that evolved around lives that lasted about 50 years. And the culture is one where we say you get an education early in life, in the middle you work and raise families, and then at the end you get a little bit of leisure. And you know, this kind of model of life worked well for lives of 50 years. They don't work for lives that last 100 years. It's time that we develop a new map of life, one that has more flexibility, that's less linear, that has twists and turns and on-ramps and off-ramps, mini sabbaticals, bite-sized courses, online learning, longer working lives and shorter working weeks, time for family before grandparenthood. We can create a world where generations live and work side by side, where work and education extend throughout most of life, and we don't have to wait for leisure until the very end. This is a world where older people will not be a drain on resources for the young, rather they will be the resources for the young. The mission of the Stanford Center on Longevity is to create a world where the majority of people arrive at old age mentally sharp, physically fit, and financially secure. It is an enormous undertaking, but I assure you that the greatest risk of failure is setting the bar too low. Thank you for your time.